Hi, today I'm in the art garden studio. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's freezing cold outside. We've got Siberian winds, I think. Oh, can't wait for it to warm up. Probably another week of this, but we're in this sanctuary of warmth. It's heaven. So what I'm going to do today is going to be an experimental technique. I've got no plan in my head, but basically I'm just going to use my new technique, which is the wave technique, and I'm going to create lots of patterns and colours, and who knows, I can't say what will come from this. It's one of those happenings on the paper. I'm in this experimental phase at the moment. I don't know where it's going to go. But what I really want to do next is I want to go bigger. So I don't know if I'm going to use all these brushes today, but I'm going to obviously start with my lovely hog's hair bushy brush, which I love. It holds a lot of paint, and you can use these hog's hair brushes for oils or acrylic and watercolour. And then I've got my Chinese brushes, which are calligraphy brushes, which you can actually write if you want to with them, and you can turn them into lovely fine points, or you can use them for the drag technique. And then my filbert, which is great for etching out, rubbing and moving the colours. So yes, so these I might use today. I'm going to do a wet and wet technique. So it's experimental and exploratory, and this paper is Bockingford. It's 140 pounds in weight, so it's light, easy to move about. Yeah, I'm not tying it down or stretching it to a board. I don't do that. I think if you've got really good paper, you don't need to. I like that freedom. And again, yeah, so it's got this rough texture to it. Bockingford. And then the paints, I've got a mixture of paints ranging from Winsor and Newton to Daniel Smith and De La Roni even, and Old Holland. So I'm just using the leftovers in the tubes. I don't waste anything. You know, paint is so expensive, so squeeze out the last dregs of the tube, or even cut the end off and get the last bits out. So we've got gamboge, we've got some different sort of pinky reds going on there, and the Prussian blue. I call it a 3-colour technique, you know, because it's those 3 colours. I'm not going to worry, but there's slightly different shades of pinks and reds. It doesn't matter. We're experimental today. So, as you can see, I have a bucket of water. I'm using my bushy hog's hair brush, and I'm wetting the paper. Now, where I wet is very important actually, because if you want to leave those slits of white, yeah, then you don't wet in those areas. So I might leave a few slits, who knows? You never know, you can't really plan it, you've just got to feel the movement, the energy, and everything really. Yeah, you've got to put everything into what you're doing. Self-expression, this is. Okay, so I think I've wet the paper really well, and that's really important. So when you put the backwashes on, like the pigments really absorb into the paper. I'm starting, as I normally do, with my lovely sort of pale yellow, and it might get stronger, I don't know, we'll see. Okay, so this is the pale yellow. So can you see how I'm just sort of sweeping it on in a very sort of, well, erratic state, really. You know, the best thing really with painting is not to try too hard. If you try too hard, if you're thinking too hard, you don't get this natural expressiveness, this gestureness on the paper. Now, the landscape itself, or whatever you see, movements, figure work, seascapes, you name it, they all consist of shapes, patterns and movement. Okay, so as you can see, I've got a bit of a stronger bit of yellow gamboge in the centre, but who knows, it might change. But okay, so this is what I do, is I pick up the paper, and yes, I get droplets of water splashing onto the table, so it's a good idea, you know, maybe to put an old piece of paper underneath. Okay. And then I sort of tip it as well, downwards. Okay. So I'm actually going to keep, see this area here, where there's this slit of white. I'm going to really keep an eye on that area. This is going to be the area where the strength is going to be. Okay. So we've got a few slits up here. I might work a little bit more of my backwash of gamboge, you know, just in areas, just sweeping it on. Now, if you don't want streaks, then again, you tip the paper downwards and then across. So you're creating that softness, that etherealness. Okay, so instantly that's gone. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is mix these lovely shades of pinks. Okay, so these pinks are a mixture of alizarin crimson, you've got quinacridone rose, those sort of colours, and scarlet. But look what's happened here. So you've got vermilion instantly. So I'm going to use that. I'm using it. Okay. So I just drop some water into that to make it slightly paler. And again, look, more water. Okay. It's all about water. It's watercolour. We don't want some stiff, flat kind of painting here. We want something that's magical, has movement, okay, has energy. So as I'm just sort of sweeping across the paper at the moment, I'm going to do that for a bit because I feel that I want to do that at the moment. But also I'm starting to undulate, so I'm going to start bringing in the wave technique. Don't worry about the edges because you'll be bringing in so many other tones around it. Okay. It's very important, look, to tip it. Okay, can you see that? Okay, and then bring it down. Okay. Movement. Don't try too hard, just feel what you're doing. You have a beautiful, delicate, sort of warm, glowy backwashes now. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these delicate colours. I really like that. I don't really want to interfere too much with my colour background at the moment. So now I'm going to start bringing in some earthy tones. And this is where the wave technique is going to, take on this sort of, these formations. Again, it's exploratory. We don't know what's going to really happen. But what I do is I mix into the same colour as well. So you create a lovely tonal balance. That's really important. So I put a bit more pink now into my colour wash. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is add some Prussian blue. Look at what the Prussian blue does. It's got so much depth. A lot of people are scared to use Prussian blue, but it's a wonderful blue. It's one of my favourite blues. Okay, so it makes this earthy colour, because as soon as you put that on, you create shadows. So I'm not going to interfere with the sky this time. I'm going to leave the sky just as it is, very soft. I don't want anything dark coming down over it. I've been doing quite a lot of strong impact dark scenes, and I'm going to try not to, but in a way, sometimes you can't, whatever you try not to do, sometimes it just doesn't work like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is start waving. Okay, so we've got this wave, and then what happens instantly, because it's wet, it feathers up, doesn't it? Get all these particles of pigment feathering up from it. I'm going to use that to my advantage. So okay, so we're going across it again. I've slightly not gone up so high, because every time you do this wave technique, you get different formations each time. It's very important as well to keep making up your colours as you go as well. So I'm making up another colour now, which is a purple, but I'm just going to get a little bit stronger. And sometimes when you haven't mixed the colour that well, you get this. But in a way, I'm not going to worry about that, because I'm going to go back over that. Quite like that. Okay. So we've got these, here we go. If I do that, straight away I have like this channel of light. It could be anything, couldn't it? But I'm going to work with that. I'm not going to fill that in. And I'm just sticking with this purple at the moment. Look at that. Okay, so this is a wonderful exercise for seascapes, for hills, landscape. You could even use this in figure work, you know, and people and shapes and buildings. Okay, so now I'm sort of condensing my strips a bit more, but I'm not thinking about too much. I'm just getting these colours, this movement, this energy onto the paper. Okay, what I've now done is I want a bronze colour. So I've instantly sort of, you know, you've just got to quickly make up a colour that you like. Okay, so I'm creating a bit more earthy tones, which I love using in my work. I mean, this year particularly though, coming back from Cornwall, I did create a lot of lovely blue colours, which I don't normally do. But because I live in North Dorset, we're surrounded by muted earthy tones with this dramatic sort of light that we get. Okay, so it looks quite different because I put this brown, okay, against the purple. And I'm still using the wave technique, and I will carry on using the wave technique. This is what I love, the filbert there, just slightly tweaking that. I have a little area here where there's a pocket of water sitting there, but actually I'm just going to leave that. I quite like that because it's sort of interesting. Again, right, so I've now added some more Prussian into that sort of browny, bronzy colour, and I've made this very deep, can you see that? Deep, I don't know, peacock green, almost sea green, isn't it? So what you tend to get as well, you know, when the light is at the end of the day, is you get all these dark, shadowy tones anyway, going across the landscape. Okay, I'm just bringing that underneath there. And what will happen is that might go slightly, I think I'm going to bring this colour just slightly up again, so it's undulated. Now we've got sort of a reddy brown there. I quite like that. I'm going to leave that there. Don't want to lose that at all. Okay. It's a very simple exercise, but it's very important to keep that rhythm, to keep that energy. This area here is what I keep looking at, and I'm almost tempted to drop something into there. I think I'm not going to though. I'm just going to leave it as it is and see what happens there, because as all these pigments start working together, you get other colours start to form that you would never think. Okay, so there's another colour now. Put a little bit of gamboge into that colour. You know, so this is really great to loosen up your colour mixing. There, so we've got, I think what I'm going to do is just bring in that now. I don't know why I did that. There. There we go. I've just got a little area. I don't want to lose that though, I really don't. Just brushing that out. There. Brush that out. Use a dry brush. If you get the odd hairs, don't worry about it. You can pull them out when it's dried. So what I got is this lovely pool of turquoise Prussian blue mixed with, you know, these shades a tiny bit, but I've got this, I'm going to go over that even more, so it creates even more strength of depth. Because with watercolour, the hardest thing is knowing how much colour to put on. But when you're doing an experimental one, I wouldn't worry about that at all, just do it. Just put the layers on and see what happens. You might go too dark, you might not like it initially, but what happens is, most watercolours, they gradually, when they're just been done, they're really strong. But I love it when a watercolour ages through its existence and it's sort of, you get these areas where it's slightly faded and it's really interesting that. Okay, so I'm just skimming again. I'm still doing the wave technique. So it looks, as soon as you do that, it looks really strong, doesn't it? That will fade. I'm not going to tip it. I'm not going to move it too much. I'm going to keep this light here. Bring some of that up there. You see how many layers of paint I have to use. So never be stingy with your paint. Be very important when you're working like this as well. When you lift the brush off, it's very important that you don't flick up too much, or else you really will end up with loads of speckles all over your sky. Okay, so what I've got now is this amazing sort of, again, this sort of peacock green colour now. Many, many layers. Look at these sort of seaweed colours. You know, we could be in a, you know, I could be down at Studland with this sort of lovely sort of pink heather sort of coming through slightly. I almost feel that I'm nearly done. So you get areas where I've lifted the brush off, where the paint really sits in a certain area. And when you're working like this, you're working freestyle, but you've still got to keep observing all the time as it's drying, because you really need to understand, you know, these formations and what's happening. Once you know a technique, then that's great, because you're not thinking too much about how you're going to approach it or do it. You just do it. I need some more pink. Just squeezing out what little left I've got in that little tube. And that's quite a nice rich colour, which I'm going to just slightly bring in underneath there, a little bit under there, under there. So you're going back over what you put on initially. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is just see what happens now and stop for a bit. And what I want, if anyone is watching my art demonstration is to just observe how these colours, these pigments are changing all the time. There's a little tiny speckle there, just tiny. So again, the filbert is really great because it just tidies it up a bit if you don't want a little speckle. There. So I'm going to keep looking at this, keep watching what's happening, and I feel I might have to go back over that bit in a minute, so I'm going to make sure I've got enough paint on this brush to go back over. Just drop a tiny bit of water into there, tiny, just to loosen that up a bit, not too much. That's why these brushes are great, because the paint just sits in the brush, and that's really important. If the brush is too wet, you could just go over that, if you haven't got enough paint on the brush as well, and it would lift off all the colours that you've put on initially. So that's really important to make sure you do not make that mistake. No, I am not going to pick up the paper and move it at all. This is great, you can work flat and just keep observing, and it's really therapeutic. It's actually just lovely, just using your brush like a little wave. When you're watching the process of all these pigments that I've layered over and over again in a wave technique, it's fascinating. You know, there's areas that you'll just love the way those colours are worked together. I really love this area here actually, and then I like this bit here, and then yeah, where I've left that pool, you know, it could be anything, it doesn't matter. It's wonderful working like this. I'm going to go back over again. And you've got to do it while it's wet. And again, don't try and do it too perfectly. Don't think too hard. Sometimes I've ended up going back on myself as well. If you like to do that, you do whatever you feel comfortable with your brush. The most important thing is you don't try and fiddle. The brain is very complex, and sometimes, you know, instantly you want to then start drawing it too much or start fiddling with things. And I do that a lot. I have been doing that a lot recently. When I come to do trees, particularly when I'm trying to form a particular tree or reeds or grasses. But with this is pure, no planning, totally from your feelings of many places that you've been to. I'm going to leave this now because I really think I've got enough strength of colour going through here. It's kind of sitting in. You can see it starts to absorb right in, but the strength sits as I'm looking in areas. And it doesn't matter if it's not all the way along. You know, you'll get areas where it'll fade out. And I particularly love the fact that the pinks have come through underneath here. You know, I really like this bit here is interesting. And then I've created this height, this bank. It could be woodland. It could be, you know, a heathland area. it could, you know, it could be anything that you want it to be, but I'm not going to start forming things because it's all about the colours and the water and those layers that form the sculptural, organic painting, if you want to call it like that. This bit here is what I'm really studying. From those layers, quite like the fact there was a little bit of that pea green just coming up through there. There's a little bit of turquoise just there. But just here, I might have to go back over just that bit again. So I'm just going to make sure I'm prepared for that. Hope I've got enough colour. Sometimes you never know if I might have to squeeze out a tiny bit more. You mix these three colours together, it's wonderful. Petrol blue colour that is. Right, I think I'm going to use that. I am going to use that. Here it goes. Okay. Again, can you see? Again, more strength, more depth. Just don't be scared to do that. Again, here. Now I will leave it. I said that last time, but now I'm definitely going to leave it. Technique, watercolour. It was totally experimental. There was no planning in my head. But it's just all my thought processes coming out, but using the rhythm of my brush and using the same brush, which I must clean it because it's totally full of colour, and keeping that continuation, that repetitiveness of the pattern and overlapping again and again and again over very simple backwashes first of all. I see this many times at the end of the day when the light's just about to drop down, but I feel that I've been somewhere else in this, and it feels like it's at the back of Studland for me, because I do walk that area quite a bit on the Studland Peninsula. There's an area that's tucked away and hidden. So maybe I was there when I was painting it, but not thinking about it. It just happened. So I am really pleased. I think it'll grow on me. It's never instant. You don't instantly like what you create. But it's spontaneous, and I love the colours and the movement. Bye for now.